Like, people don't know what birds are. So obviously there's no music talking about birds.
Which, okay, the thing about the birds, I need to have a talk about that because in the first season, they definitely talk about eggs. There has to be something that's laying these eggs. Like, I would assume chickens.
Lizards. It seems like all knowledge has to be passed on orally.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, that means that the knowledge that's passed on can be controlled. Because if somebody knows something that they shouldn't, they have drugs to get rid of that knowledge.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. Is there a memory drug?
By the way, I literally had to wipe away tears as I was...
Oh, I saw. I saw you. And then I was like, wow, you're being very vulnerable right now.
Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark and I are talking about the hit Apple TV series Silo, Season 2, Episode 3, Solo, so spoilers are ahead. And if you're enjoying these videos, then a like would be appreciated. If you don't want to miss a single one, then just be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications. And with that, what are kind of your overall thoughts on this episode?
Well, I liked it. I think this was an overall good episode. You know, we got something that I was complaining a little bit about. We got both stories, Silo 17, Silo 18, happening at the same time. So we get to see what's going on with Juliette, and we get to see what's going on with the rebellion. So overall, I think this was a great episode. I think we got a lot more out of it. I mean, definitely more questions, but a little bit more answers to certain things.
This one hit hard for me. Like, I really thought that this one was absolutely great. I liked the kind of tension that was built by having those first two episodes be separate and in different silos and not kind of moving back and forth. Because I think when the pace picked up, like, that built up tension. And when we kind of see the effect of that and all of that comes together, I think we hit a lot of strong emotional beats in this episode. There was a lot of really good release from the tension that had been built, while additional tension is still building. Like, this felt like the first drop in the roller coaster, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we'd been building to something kind of big, and I feel like this gave us something important so that we can kind of continue the ride.
Yeah, and similarly with the Silo Season 1, the third episode is about when they have to fix the generator. So that episode really wasn't narrative heavy. It was very much focused on fixing the generator. And so the fact that we're third episode in on the second season, we got more information about, you know, Silo 17. We got a little bit better peek into the vault, a little understanding of how the order works and like how to quash the rebellions and how to respond to graffiti. You know, we see a little bit more about Silo 17, what Solo's doing.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of get a little bit more of his backstory. And so I think we just got a lot in this episode. And of course, with that, it brought a lot more questions.
A lot of questions.
I just packed full of questions right now.
Yeah, I'll fire off the first one.
Okay.
This is probably the most random one, so maybe not the one I should lead with, but I don't really care. In the vault, in Silo 18's vault.
Correct. Okay.
I noticed that there were numbers on the side of those panels. The three numbers I saw were first 103 and 104, one above the other. And then in a different shot, there was a gap between them and 102 above them. And it looked like the panels open. So it looks like they potentially hold stuff. And it could just be so that you can get to the electronics of like the lights and repair them. Who knows? But also the fact that they're numbered kind of to me seemed like it was organized storage so that things can easily be found. I'm just kind of curious like what the numbers were because it seemed like an intentional choice.
It does seem to me that it's some kind of storage. I will agree with that. And I think that might be like where supplies are, like how it has Solo's clearly locked in the vault of Silo 17. How has he been feeding himself for what seems like 30, 40 years?
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that in those storage things, food, maybe some music, which music is a weird one that like we really haven't heard of before. Possibly there's relics in there that talk about the past.
Right. I think the only music that we had seen in the silo previously was from like a street band with what looked like very cobbled together instruments during like Freedom Day.
Yeah. And at
We
the
kind of saw,
funeral.
and at the yes,
Yeah. But nothing like
yes,
recorded music.
yes, yes. Which is interesting because a record player isn't very technologically advanced, but at the same time, if knowledge is like a biohazard, it's dangerous. You know, like the symbol that they have for relics looks like the biohazard symbol.
Right.
And a lot of that stuff is attached to, you know, old knowledge. And if that's the case, then I could see record players being on the ban list because I mean, yes, they're primarily used for music, but they can hold anything recorded. So like it could have just knowledge in general. Even possibly like even some things that are don't seem like they're very important could still come off as like people don't know what birds are. So obviously there's no music talking about birds.
Which, okay, the thing about the birds, I need to have a talk about that because in the first season, they definitely talk about eggs. Like they have eggs. Because Juliette, when she's making the eggs for herself and she like almost sets the house on fire, there has to be something that's laying these eggs. Like I would assume chickens.
Lizards.
Could be lizards. Could be snakes.
Lizard
gators.
Eggs. Now they're gator eggs. That would be a decent size. They're eating gator eggs. Well, maybe what's the one of the smaller ones with like the really narrow stout?
Dodo bird.
No, like not no. Similar to gators and crocodiles.
Caiman.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have.
Because I feel like a gator egg would be like an ostrich egg. Like it'd be on kind of a.
Gator eggs are not that big.
Oh, they're not?
No, they're not that big. They're close to chicken eggs. Ostrich eggs.
I think this is very important for the podcast.
Yeah.
it's like the giant pandas and how like they come out as like the size of a stick of butter, like the babies.
Right.
Like that's
very tiny.
That's wild that something that huge is just like that tiny when I think it's smaller than a stick. Anyways.
It's like a jelly bean size.
Okay.
Like very tiny.
Really? Yeah. Bad tangent. I'm sorry. Your turn.
Okay.
Question.
But, I mean, I do think that like, you know, there is certain things where it seems like books are not allowed other than the Pact.
Right.
It's like recorded history can't be there. So like the recording, you know, that just leads to questions, especially if there's an instrument you don't understand. Then they're like, what is that instrument? Kind of like they want to hide that Georgia book, which could be not really dangerous, but
it seems like all knowledge has to be passed on orally.
Yeah.
And that's wild. And to a certain extent, that means that the knowledge that's passed on can be controlled, because if somebody knows something that they shouldn't, they have drugs to get rid of that knowledge.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. Is there a memory drug?
Is it your turn?
I think so.
It's been said. Is there a memory drug? I think.
Is there a memory drug?
There is, because we saw it in the last season. The woman that was being held, and Pete Nichols had to like administer whatever in order to get her out of her state.
Well, so there's a memory drug that she talks about, that Gloria talks about, that says they put something in the water that makes you forget. Okay? Then there's this medication, which Gloria didn't forget everything that she told Juliette. She was able to tell her everything, but there is a medication that makes her go into like a comatose state. Sims promised Patrick this drug to forget these things, but he literally just set Patrick up to be killed instead. He got the marksman pistol guy. So is there a memory drug? Because everybody also that saw the stuff that Julia put on the screens, they said that they're medicated. Not necessarily their minds are wiped, but they have been medicated, like Gloria. Because you would think that if Gloria knew all these things to tell Juliette, why didn't they just erase her memory? But I also still do think there is a memory drug, and it kind of relates to something else that we saw. So the projector that Meadows had.
Yes.
Is that Meadows as a child?
I had that same question, but then Dawn reminded me, and I saw with like the second viewing, that there's a bunch of stuff on there. It seems like a bunch of home movies. There's like sledding, and there's riding a horse, and some of those definitely aren't Meadows.
Right. And I'm wondering if it's like, what if, because it did seem like Meadows was really affected by that. Like, if these home movies meant nothing to Meadows, why would they be so upsetting to her?
See, I do think that there is a memory forgetting thing, because something that bugged me about the first season was Gloria, when she was dreaming of the beach, or like, I don't remember exactly how the beach came up, but she, in her head, she did this thing where she like put her toes in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the kind of thing that it would take so many words to explain that for the most part, the only way that somebody can like really think of that in their head is if they've experienced it. Like it is just such a weird sense that like the ground is a firm thing. It's not something that you can just like wiggle your toes and they just sink into. Like that's something that I feel like you can't comprehend unless you have done it. And so to me, when I saw that, it was like, okay, I either don't like this because I think it's written poorly, or she's experienced this.
And that's kind of like where I have come to with this. Like, I do think there is a memory drug. And even though Patrick Kennedy questions it, he's like, if there is a drug, like, I want to go this far back.
Yeah.
And maybe they can go that far back, maybe not. But like, when I was looking at that projector, the projector could have been, because like Meadows seemed really upset. You know, there did look like there were, in those videos, yes, there were people that looked like Meadows. There are people that didn't look like Meadows. What if that is a compilation of all of the people that are at the top, like of their previous memories before coming into the silo? So like maybe one of those was Mayor Johns, one of those was Bernard, and all of these higher up people before they got in the silo. And I think maybe Bernard doesn't have his memory wiped, and potentially Judge Meadows also doesn't have her memory wiped. And that is partially why she is such an alcoholic, because she remembers a time being outside as well, and that she knows that being in this silo with the vault, we have to erase memories, and we have to just pretend like this is how it's always been.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind all or part of that, because I've kind of been simmering on something similar.
Okay.
Okay. One of my questions.
Yes.
How the hell does the Pact know what it knows with such detail?
The Pact or the Order?
The Order.
Okay. Yeah, this is another one I have a question about.
The fact that it knows all the things that are going to happen after a failed cleaning. You're going to see graffiti, and maybe that graffiti is related to the person that went out, or whatever it was that was like mentioned in the order. There's a couple of options. One of them is crazy. Like they've got a crazy supercomputer that can run a ton of simulations. And so it's figured all of this out. And so they got the information from running simulations. I don't think that's necessarily likely. Another thing is like experience, which would mean that before this round of silos, has there been a bunch of other rounds of silos and they've learned from it? And like each round of silos, they improve. Or there's, and I don't think that this is the case, there's also magic, like they can predict, and that's why they've figured it out. And then the last one is possibly like poor writing, and I doubt that.
I don't think it's magic, and I don't think it's poor writing. We did learn about really advanced computers. That one, we heard
it really advanced for these people, because they haven't experienced anything outside of like their tiny computers that look like they're from the like 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're necessarily, they are more advanced than what we have, like the VR helmets, I guess.
Well, so that's the thing. So Solo was talking about that there's the advanced computers that make you see everything so detailed. And so like she was like, I don't understand how they did that. And he was like, yeah, advanced computers. And then also looking at that projector box was just this little square box, doesn't even need to be plugged in. And it just plays something. And it's so tiny. There's just a play button, and it just projects this beautiful, like, HD image, basically.
How did I not think about the fact that that didn't need to be plugged in?
Yeah, didn't need to be plugged in. Just tiny little box that had all these videos on it. And
the amount of light that's put... Ooh.
Yeah. And we also saw that...
I think you just broke me.
I tend to do that a lot, and I'm sorry for this. I hope I didn't break any of you out there. So I mean, I think the two options that you have for how the Order knows is advanced computers. But I do think that, like, I think there are advanced computers, because also in the vault we see there's like that wispy stuff. And that reminded me a lot of what Juliette was seeing in her visor. So I do think there is really smart computers, but I also feel like for them to know this stuff, because like, you know, as smart as your computers are, like, I feel like human behavior is very hard to like track and know. And I guess, yeah, you could run a million simulations, whatever. But to me, this feels like this is not like the first silo. Like, they must have done tests on people previously.
Yeah. That's where I'm kind of leaning.
Yeah. Like, there maybe was like a pilot silo program, like before the world went to shit, and they were just like trying. Yeah. And they saw what they needed to do and how to like keep these people in order. And then they were like, all right, when the actual silo goes in, we have the order, we know what to do. But yeah, I feel like there's just still a lot of questions around it in general. Like a little bit. Okay, here's another question I have. When Solo talks about the people didn't die right away when they went out, and then the dust blew away and brought the poison back in. So maybe it's not completely toxic out there.
I forgot to write that down, but I was kind of in the same camp as you on that. There was a second part to that related to that, which is the way he described the fact that it was a nice day kind of made it sound like he might have been out to experience it.
Right. So like, but also he's kind of an unreliable narrator. We know he sees things. He thought Juliette might not be real. So he is unreliable in that sense. But the way he describes it makes it seem like that the poison did leave and it came back. So like maybe it's not always poisonous out there. And also, if the generator is completely flooded, how is there any life support system or lights where they are?
If the backup generator is not down in the down deep, it didn't seem like it was like bright, like the generator was running and all the lights were on.
Right.
It was like certain lights, and it was pretty dark, even for the silo, which is always kind of dark. So I could potentially see that as like backup generator is somewhere else. But yeah, that is a little sus.
Yeah. So I'm almost wondering if it's not completely always toxic outside, or maybe like the toxins don't sink. Maybe they just are mixed with the atmosphere. And so in the silo, without a generator, like you can still breathe in there because the toxins don't come in potentially.
Yeah, weird. Or there is an outside group that releases it to like deal with the cleanings and the uprisings so that they get what they want. Although it is barren. I would say unless this is a desert, it's hard to believe that it would look like that, but there's like a dead tree, which means that it definitely wasn't always a desert. How long can a dead tree survive? They've been down there for like 140. Would a dead tree still look like that? Or is that part of like the lie? Like it
might be part of the lie.
Okay. I want to say this quote because I like this.
Okay.
Meadows says to Paul about the syndrome, "It's time we remove the stigma caused unnecessarily by a few discriminatory phrases in the Pact." And to me, there's two things I want to parse from this. The first part is like, I want to be explicit and separate the fact that she didn't explicitly say that the Pact talks about the syndrome. It is kind of implied, but there is the possibility that it's just like there's some discriminatory language that could apply to people that happen to have the syndrome. So my first kind of question is, does it actually reference the syndrome? And if so, I think that is kind of like potentially further proof that whoever set this up has done this before, because they've dealt with people being underground and getting this thing that only happens in this kind of underground situation. And so that's kind of like the first question is like, is it actually referenced? And then the second question that's related, and I don't know if it's cheating that I'm like doing two questions in a row. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
They're related to one statement. The second part is the pact somehow discriminatory or like prejudiced in some ways? And it does seem like that is very possible, because there is a lot of like control that they have in the silo. And I get that some of this has to do with like survival, like every single woman gets birth control. That's wild. I do get it. Like if couples do more than average 2 child per, it's not sustainable. Like there's literally not space for it. But so I get that like some of that could just be dealing with like saving lives, but they also use this to be able to control who can procreate, not just how much procreation there is. And to me, that's getting into like some of that weird territory of possibly eugenics. I'm just curious whether or not like the pact is prejudiced and or discriminatory in general, not just related to this one condition.
Okay, let me try to unpack this for you. I'll try to answer all of your questions, because I think I have ideas.
You have the answers?
I don't have answers. I have guesses or what.
Okay. You have theories. Okay.
We already know that the order is discriminatory against the Down Deep, because they do say we have to blame Mechanical and unite the silo against them. So they do have this already discriminatory practice against a certain class of people.
Yeah.
Now, I do kind of have a theory with the syndrome specifically. I do think the syndrome is mentioned in the Pact, because there is a spot that says, and they've talked about it, that the sheriff cannot have the syndrome.
Oh, that's yes. Yeah.
And that's why Billings
it is definitely mentioned.
Yes.
In that like certain positions can, yes, you're, and I don't think it's just the sheriff. I think
positions of power.
Position, yes. So like he already shouldn't have been able to be in judicial.
Yes. Now, my theory though, is what if the syndrome is looked down negatively based on the order pact? Because what Meadows said in this episode, she said it's not caused by vitamin deficiency or lack of whatever. It's a human reaction to an unnatural situation. And what if in these simulations or whatever that they figured out with this syndrome, people with the syndrome are more likely to fight back because they have this feeling of unnaturalness. Like they're stuck underground. They don't know why they're underground. And so like it causes this human reaction that creates probably this uncomfortability that would make them do something against the silo to stop the syndrome. And that's why they can't have positions of power, because if you put somebody with positions of power in authority figures and then they're like trying to figure out what's going on, they have more access to that. And I think they let the exception with Billings go because he's such a rule follower. That's kind of my theory on the syndrome.
Interesting. I like that. I like that a lot. And it's interesting that, if people haven't watched our other videos or haven't read certain articles, it is important to remember that the syndrome is not a part of the books. This is something that was added just for the TV show, which I think I like how the syndrome is interacting with everything. It feels, I haven't read the book, so I'm not an authority on this, but it feels natural. It feels like a part of this world.
Yeah.
Also, in the last episode, we talked about the fact that there are the different levels are like classes. And maybe I'm dense for not having picked up on this, but it's interesting that it's literally like high class, middle class, low class. Like they're literally in the same order.
Yeah.
I'm just going to toss this in here. So kind of adding to the whole like discriminatory part and the fact that the silo can control not just who procreates, but relationships are supposed to be sanctioned. And I'm kind of curious about what rules they have around that, like when and how do they say no to a relationship? Is that an age thing, or you have to be dating for a period of time before you can get into something real? Like what is it around relationships that they have to be sanctioned? Why is so much controlled?
Well, because I think,
and why do you have the answers to all of my questions?
I don't. I'm speculating wildly.
Okay.
This is me speculating wildly. I have no idea. But to me, like, I think about like Alison Becker and Holston Becker.
Yeah.
And Alison Becker might be the type of person that might be one to ask questions, right? She's like one of those people that might cause problems.
So she can't be paired up with another troublemaker.
Right. Like she couldn't date a George because if two troublemakers are together talking about it. So they sanction a relationship between Holston Becker and Alison Becker because Holston Becker is a law follower.
Yeah.
And, and I think that like for, if you think about Sims and his wife, they're both rule followers. So that's an easy sanction there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why Juliette and George never tried to get sanctioned, because they probably would have never got sanctioned. Juliette comes from Hannah, who was a flamekeeper. George comes from Gloria's family, who was a flamekeeper. So putting two flamekeepers together, they probably would have never been sanctioned. So that's my idea of like how they would
100%.
sanction
I think you're right on that. Like I can't say 100%, 99%. I think that is the correct answer.
And so when we see
it's a way to deal with the troublemakers,
Right. And that's why Allison couldn't have a baby, because she might be a troublemaker. We don't want her to procreate.
Damn, I think you're right.
My last question is the names.
Damn it, that's my last question.
Well, perfect. We'll finish on this question for the question segment.
But yeah, you go, because that's my question. That's all I have. I have written down the wall of names.
So, what could be the wall of names? Like, and why does Knox finally think he knows what that wall of names is? Like, is it another rebellion? Is it the names of the old rebellion that happened? Is it... I don't know. Are there names of people in the silo currently? I don't know.
Okay.
No. I'm just glad we both don't know anything about these names. Like, it was just such a little tease, and I got nothing out of it.
Such a little tease. Okay, so wall of names. So while we're down here, I think that brings us kind of to the down deep. And there were great moments down here. I thought it was interesting, the opening. I thought it was wild how brutally they carried out Teddy.
Yeah.
There were like literally all this kid has done is graffiti. And I know that is potentially detrimental to the survival of 10,000 people, like all the people in the silo. So I do get why it's so important to get him. But they were carrying him horizontally.
Yeah.
And that it was a weird way to carry somebody, but it's also a way to like completely immobilize them.
Right.
And that was just like, that was a wild kind of visual to see.
Yeah. And I think it's
almost like he was treated like an animal.
Right. Well, and like I think that's part of that, right? They want to get mechanical fired up to start a rebellion and then turn the whole silo against the rebellion.
So it was like purposefully and in everybody's face, over the top. Like that was purposeful kind of police brutality to get them riled up so that they can squash it.
Right. And it does seem that like Knox is being really good at like quelling the rebellion from happening down there. Like he has been this like this figure that's trying to like keep the peace down there.
But it's for a different reason with him. I think he's smart enough to know that people are watching and listening, and everybody in the rebellion thinks they're being secretive, but they know about it, you know? Like everybody knows about it. And so like I think Knox's thing isn't like, hey guys, let's follow the rules. I think Knox's thing is like, you guys are going to get yourself killed. Like everybody hates the down deep and mechanical.
So like to me, I think Knox knows that like they want a rebellion down there so they can come squash it and just like destroy the families down there and just take out the down deep. I feel like Knox is very much like, they're going to tear our houses apart looking for him. They're going to do this. Like, we don't want this. And like Shirley, blinded by rage, and even like I'd say, you know, Walker and a couple of those other people, Cooper, that are like trying to start this rebellion. Like Knox is like saying, if we start this, they will come down here with the boot and stop us. Like we need to not let this happen. And we saw Patrick Kennedy set up to like incite that. Like, and like the expert marksman pistol raider sent down there to make sure that he kills Patrick Kennedy. And like,
which, speaking of brutality and exactly that scene you're talking about, expert marksman pistol guy, right? The second viewing, when I watched that, those two shots, there was a little bit of time between them. It wasn't like a bop bop, like if one of these shots misses, hopefully the other one hits. There was enough time between that I think he chose to kill both of those people. I think that second shot was intentionally for Coop. And not even necessarily because he thought Coop was helping. Like, I don't know what the justification was, if that was like additional punishment for the down deep and part of like quelling the rebellion. But I think that death was intentional. Like that murder was intentional.
I think that to give Reggie the benefit of the doubt, the marksman guy.
Yeah.
Like Coop was right next to Patrick Kennedy when he threw that thing.
Yeah.
And I think with the commotion of the fire, the crowd that was all reacting to it, he knew he had to shoot somebody, but he may have not known which one did it and like which one he was supposed to kill. And so he was like, to be safe, I'll just kill both of them and make sure I get the guy that threw it. And if I hit somebody from the down deep, I don't care.
I think it was a little bit more intentional than that. And I don't know if it was like he was told to make sure that it hurt the down deep, or he just wanted to hurt the down deep because he doesn't like them. You know, he did mention like there's something about the air down there.
Yeah.
So like he definitely doesn't like it and or them. I don't, there's something about how they took so much time to point out the fact that he was a good marksman. And they even had like his award for being a good marksman. And so to me, that was them saying like twice we're saying how good he is. So for me, it wasn't a mistake. You like beyond just like, oh, I don't know who did it. And I'll just take them both out. Like I think there was some malice there.
Potentially. Very much potentially. But then I feel like, you know, if he's killing a couple of them, why wouldn't he just kill more? Why wouldn't he be shot a third time, a fourth time?
Everyone else was down. I don't think he could have made that look like a mistake. I think it's very easy to make it, because it literally was just two shots, you know? So it was like,
right.
It was the work of a marksman. It wasn't like, I don't know if this is going to hit. I'm going to keep shooting until I see him fall. He was done shooting before they fell.
Right.
So I think if he'd done additional and they were like way off, I think that would have been pretty clear that especially with him being a marksman.
Or he shot Cooper because he saw Cooper trying to stop him, Patrick Kennedy, from doing this, and he knew this was happening. And so if Cooper had stopped him, that wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have created this whole thing. So that's why he was like, bam, bam.
I think it was after the thing was, the Molotov cocktail was already thrown. So I don't think.
Right. But like, because he tried to stop, he was going to be something that was going to cause resistance to this. So bam, bam. Yeah.
Speaking of Coop, we literally, in the last episode, we're talking about, we were just talking about how the people in the Down Deep haven't been used a ton in the first season. They were just kind of side characters, and it felt like they were really blossoming And that was one of the ones we pointed out. And for me, it like the other ones already felt fully developed. It didn't feel like we were getting a ton of them. Whereas like with Cooper, he was always under Juliette. And so like he didn't get a chance to really show what he could do. And it felt like he was really coming into his own, as to a certain extent, it's almost like this was like him coming into his manhood, you know, and then cut short. I forgot that they just kill people in this show.
Yeah.
That one hurt.
That one did hurt. And I think probably out of all the deaths, because like if you think about all the deaths that happened in the last season, it was very much like people that were early on. Like Martin's was kind of sad because he was, 4 episodes deep before he died, and Mayor Johns was a little sad, but like Coop is a whole season in. Like, we didn't get a ton of Cooper, but like he was important. And just watching like Hank's reaction to Cooper's death, like just like the sweetest guy you ever meet, like,
yep.
And he's gone now. And then I think it's kind of setting up what's coming on with this whole rebellion, and like what the cost of rebelling will be on these people in the Down Deep.
Yeah. It's wild seeing Juliette in 17 kind of making that connection of, oh shit, that's what happened in this silo, and that's what I just did in my silo.
I think that was such a great moment, because I feel like the whole first season was Juliette being like, this is a bunch of lies, this is bullshit, like I'm not following the rules of this, like we're being manipulated.
Yeah.
And then to see the consequences of her action through like what happened through another silo, and like now the desperation to get back, to be like, I gotta fix this.
Yeah. And this is the first time that she's really doing something non-selfishly, because the other stuff has always been about George was killed. I need to get to the bottom of that, regardless of how many people get hurt in me trying to uncover the truth.
Right.
And like, I need to know this, to really realizing 10,000 people, including a bunch of her friends. I think for once she has to think outside of just herself.
Yeah.
And that side was a really interesting side. Also, I loved Solo's portrayal in this.
I do too.
I'm curious, like I feel like I got a little something extra, and you probably did too, from having gone to Comic-Con and hearing that he's a 10-year-old in a 45-year-old's body, because for me, so many things I saw in his performance, I already knew that, and they just like made so much sense. And I love the nuances. For a number of other people, I have a feeling that many of the things he's doing are strange.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't necessarily understand why yet. And I'm sure at some point they will understand. And I'm sure if they go back and they rewatch, like it'll be one of those things where it's like, oh, that's why he was acting like this. But also most people don't rewatch.
Right.
So it was interesting knowing that going into it, because I felt like I could really appreciate so many of the nuances of what he was doing. Many things felt so childlike.
Right. Which also is a little bit perplexing to me, because he said that he was Russell's shadow.
Yes.
And this could be anything. Like if Russell didn't open the door and he was trying to hold off these people and he was only in there with one person and it's a kid, he's like, well, you're my shadow now. Like this is what you have to do. Like I think we're going to get more revelations that Solo was young when he became a shadow. And another question that's like related to that is like, she mentioned that there's bodies there that were more recent than before. And I think those are the people that wrote, we'll get you sooner or later.
Yes.
Who are those people?
Yeah. I mean, that should have been in like the questions thing. I know. I'm right there. I'm right there with you, where it's like this episode gave so much while at the same time opening like a flood of other questions, which is great, because if they just hosed us like Walker with questions without giving us anything, it would have felt very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
So it felt like we got a little something to survive off of, and then just got so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you felt like Solo poisoned Juliette when she ate that food at first.
God, it was such a good fake out. Yeah, that was my.
Oh my gosh, that
right
was
away.
Oh, I needed you to eat that food. I'm like, oh God, he killed her. He poisoned her. This is gonna be bad.
Or like put her to sleep. It was like there was something in there.
Yeah,
was definitely what I was thinking. And I assumed it was poison, and then like as a second, it was like sleep agent.
Right. And nope, it was just making sure she was real. Which I think this, goes back to the nuances of this performance. Like Steve Zahn, phenomenal actor. I think he's a very underrated actor. He's not the main star of a lot of things, but he plays a supporting actor very well, and he like loses himself in the role. And I feel like he did such a good job with this character. And like for most of the first couple episodes, we've only seen like this much of him.
Right.
And yet he still has delivered a great performance as just eyeballs.
Right. And this has got to be a weird role for him, because like to play somebody that is emotionally stunted like this, for me, so many things really seemed like not just a person starved for human companionship, but also really seemed childlike. When I watched his performance and he was walking towards the bridge, like before he even got to the makeshift bridge, the like small, very tentative steps he was taking seemed like the kind of steps of a kid who hasn't been in this situation before. When he fell down and didn't know exactly how to articulate if he was hurt and if she caused it or anything like that, felt so much like a child, trying to have power over her, of saying he can kill her and like, don't open this door. So like trying to take power, but then so quickly folding when she tries to walk away, like, no, don't leave me.
Yeah.
Like that,
sorry.
That feels like it, like, I don't, obviously, I don't have a kid, but like as far as having a dog, to me, like that feels like the same kind of thing of, they want to go and pay attention to whatever, but the moment that you go to leave, they're like, no, don't leave me. It felt like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Great performance. I think we should talk about Meadows and Bernard.
Yeah.
So
first of all, I think you were possibly right, or partially right or all the way right, that there is some tension between, like tenderness between them.
Some sexual tension between them.
I don't know if it's necessarily all the way there or not. I couldn't tell. As old as Bernard is, he might have already had a relationship, and maybe maybe this is like Mayor Johns and Marnes, where they previously had relationships, and now this is kind of like unsanctioned companionship. Because it didn't necessarily feel like in love, but it did feel like love, if that made any sense. That measuring scene was intimate and beautiful.
Yeah. I think, if I'm guessing, head of IT can't have a partner.
Ooh.
Because he would have to choose between his partner at some point and the silo. And he has to always choose the silo. So I think...
Then how was Sims up for consideration? Was he going to have to make a choice? I feel like you leave your relationship.
I mean, I'm speculating wildly, but he maybe thought that Sims would choose the silo over his family and was going to make an exception for him. And that's after we saw that Sims chose his family before the silo. That's when Bernard was like, you cannot be my shadow because you chose someone over the silo.
I definitely 100% behind that.
So maybe Bernard knows that he can't have a relationship because he might put them before the silo. And
I could see like a hard suggestion. The person needs to have the silo first 100% of the time. And so the easiest way to do that is by not having another relationship. And so maybe that's like nuns and priests and things like that, where, you know, they want, like, if it really is God first, then should you have another relationship that's that important? You're like, it should be, you know,
right.
it should be God or nothing. And so maybe it's like that kind of thing.
But it does seem like there is something there, because he was like, you're the only person I can talk to. And she's like, well, why? You don't take my advice or listen to me? And he's like, I do listen to you. I do need your advice. Like, I need your input on these things. So there does seem to be a bit of something there.
Yeah. It's wild that he clearly sees her ability to see to the core of the problem and understand what to do. And I do think he respects it. But in the end, like, he's such an unimaginative, number crunching pencil pusher that he still goes with what the order tells him to do.
Right.
Which is wild, you know? And that sounds like an insult for a wide group of people. I do feel like I'm unimaginative, like number cruncher. So I don't mean that as like an insult, but like,
I mean, she even says, like, you have to think of it like thinking of a color you've never seen before. And I don't think he can do that. Like, he deals with real figures, he deals with real numbers. And so I think he also recognizes that her input is important, because she is a kind of person that, like, is by the book, but also is capable of thinking outside the book. So,
and I think that while she does want to go out, at the same time, she is starting to feel the pull of responsibility of the silo. She's still giving advice on what to do. Like, she's finally having this clarity. And I think she wants to go out. I think she's going to choose not to. Because she possibly realized that somebody else can't understand what to do better than her.
Right. And I think she does think that his calculations are off, because she's caught him in a lie. She catches him in the lie with Juliette wanting to go out. And then he also lied to her right there about the setting up the whole thing that was going down in mechanical. Yep. So I could see that, because I think she thinks that he can't do this on his own. And that would make her want to stay.
Okay. So Dr. Nichols, if we can.
Yes.
I felt like this was his best performance in the show.
Agreed.
And for me, some of the most hard-hitting moments.
Oh, yeah.
In the show as well.
When he's talking to Phoebe Wells, I felt a lot of similarities to what's going on in the real world a little bit.
I was thinking the same thing. Man, when she said, like, I don't know if we should do this because of what's going on. I've felt that same thing about, you know, with like climate change and what humans are doing to the world. Like, is it smart to like create another human or not? And it did feel very relatable in that kind of aspect. And then for some people, it can even be like their own personal stat. Like, you don't have to put it to politics, and it could be like, you know, your personal situation of like, I don't know if I have enough money. I don't know if this is the right time. Like, that's such a tough decision. And yeah, that felt very relatable.
And I loved his line where it was like, having a baby is a venture of hope. And like the idea of these trees and how they're being planted, and, you know, the people that planted them aren't sitting in the shade of these trees. Like, I think that that's such a great, like, politics aside, whatever you're going through, like, and when life seems hopeless or not, you just have to have the idea that humanity and other stuff will persevere through these challenges.
With everything that he has been through, he was so beautifully positive. Like, knowing how awful many things are, he had a real hope for the future, hope for humanity, and a tenderness for people in a really tough situation. It honestly, it hit hard for me because, Don and I realized we're not going to be able to have children, and that was very tough for us. It was legitimately very tough for us. And so I kind of understood her side, where she kind of felt like we already thought that there was no chance, and now this is a last chance, and there's that excitement around it, but also that understanding of it's probably not going to happen, but we at least have a chance. And he was so nice, and so his description of at this point, I come to the understanding of it's not going to happen. But hearing him describe bringing a life into this world was one of the most beautiful descriptions I've honestly ever heard.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And then knowing what he's gone through, some of the things that he said after the fact were so beautiful. Like, he said, at least some good's come out of it. He's lost his daughter, and he still sees you get a chance to have yours.
Right.
There's still a chance for the future.
Right.
And then when he's doing the surgery, and he says, "I hope you have a girl."
Yeah.
It hit me.
Yeah. No, it was such a good scene. Dr. Nichols did it so great. Jorah Mormont, I love you. You do so well. But I also love the scene because it I feel like it comes full circle, right? It's previous season, Juliette asked him you're told to do this and you just do this, you just do this thing that's so kind of terrible. You're lying to people and denying them a chance to have a baby and you're getting their hopes up, and you just are okay with that. You don't question why they do this. And Juliette leaving the silo, which is already starting a rebellion down in the down deep and throughout the mids and up top, and the fact that her dad is also rebelling in a way because of the impact that Juliette had on him. And so he did stop, and like we said, if those people are not allowed to have a baby because one of them might cause trouble and they don't want to have those genes passed on, he has now gone against the silo, and these people probably will get pregnant and maybe have another, rebel on their hand. Yeah. So it came full circle. It was such a powerful scene. I love it. I love his arc so far. He has really blown me away.
Yeah.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along. Come back next week as we tackle Silo Season 2, Episode 4. But until then, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.